My name is DeLoss Yonke. I live in Illinois. I work for Illinois Farm Bureau and the RFD Radio Network. I'm the National Vice President of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. And I'd had this idea um, that if we could get some students to interact with members of our association, and maybe a light bulb goes off and say, hey, that's a road I would like to go down, or a path I'd like to consider. So we have three different levels of membership here. We have Broadcast Council, we have Allied Industry, and we have Management and Sales. All three of those are represented by young people in our association. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and our panelists are going to spend a few minutes of what they do, what a day looks like, why they got interested, why they enjoy their career, and maybe a couple of other things too. So ladies first. Stephanie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So Stephanie Hoff, I am a farm broadcaster with the Midwest Farm Report Radio Network in Wisconsin. I'm also the West Region Vice President with NAFB, so Wisconsin West. So many states we cover. I went to school at UW-Madison, so I'm a Badger. Yes, we got our butts kicked by Alabama. You can ignore that. Maybe we'll do better for the rest of the season. But UW-Madison does have an agriculture school, and they have a science communication program within that school. So that's the route I took. Never thought radio was going to be my career. Didn't occur to me ever. All my friends were going into marketing or PR, and their dream was to work for an agency. I knew I wanted to be in journalism, but I didn't think it was going to be radio. So when I graduated, I was in print journalism. I did some podcasting. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're pretty good at this," and I'm like, "Whatever." And then, I guess I didn't feel fulfilled in print journalism. I was covering so many beats. I didn't get to focus on anything niche. Agriculture was where my passion was. So I reached out to my home radio station, Bob Bosold, who's an NAFB member as well, and he's still at it today. He's been doing this for so many years. He's probably like 80 years old or something. But I was like, hey, I'm doing some audio interviews. I'd love to freelance for Wax and some of my egg stories. And when the fabulous farm babe, Pam Yonke, who is my current boss with Midwest Farm Report, when she got wind that I was thinking about doing some work for Wax, she's like, why don't you just try out being a farm broadcaster? And I jumped at the chance. It checked all my boxes. I get to talk about agriculture. It also paid a lot more than print journalism. Print journalism's not a lucrative business. I cried when they told me how much money I was going to make when I accepted the job. But so I found radio about 3.5 years ago. And I love it. It sounds cliche to say that no day is ever the same, but that is just a fact in radio. In fact, I look forward sometimes to when 2 days are the same. And a lot means I get to catch my breath a little bit there. But just to give you a sample of the stories we cover, I know everyone here, or our students listening, they know what the breadth and the, how wide agriculture topics can be. Today I talked about corn silage. I talked about the demand for organic dairy. The NFL draft is coming to Wisconsin in 2025. And
Cool.
So the Packers partnered with local farms, and they're doing draft themed corn mazes across the states. So we're talking about everything. Some of it only a farmer wants to listen to, like the quality of corn silage. But we also have an audience in Milwaukee, and we have an audience in Madison, and they want to hear stuff about corn mazes and, organic dairy demand and some of those, stories that everyone likes, the slice of life stories from rural Wisconsin. And, some of the stuff, I'd say half the stories that I listed are news content, that's news generation. But the other half of the stories were paid programs. So, not only can you get a salary in radio, but you also have these opportunities to bring in some more cash, some more value for yourself through paid programs, written blog content, things of that nature. So that's a little sample of, the scope of topics that we cover. But it's not just radio. As you know, you're turning these radio stories into articles. You're turning them into social media content. There's just never enough time in the day to communicate in all the different ways that we can. But we try. We do try. We pride ourselves on not saying no, because in radio you can be so flexible in your offerings. You can do video, you can do audio, you can do visuals. So we love it. We MC events.
Mhm.
We get to work with sales. I don't sell, but I get to go on sales calls and meet clients and brainstorm with them on the best ways to engage with their customers. And so that's just so much fun too. I can never say enough good things about farm broadcasting. I mean, it sounds like you're busy, and you are. You're busy all the time, but it's so rewarding. I mean, when we go out to county fairs or field days and you get to hear from your listeners, when you're in the studio, you're staring at a wall, you're talking to yourself, pretending that you're talking to somebody else. But when you finally get out in the field and you get face to face with your listeners and they tell you, I really liked that story you did about Monroe cheese days and the yodeling. Yes, I did that story last week about yodeling. We loved that story, or that story you did about manure digesters. I followed up with that company that you talked to. It's that kind of like, you can call it a pat on the back, but it is more than that. It's, if I'm not telling these stories, no one is. And they do
Mhm.
rely on farm broadcasters because this content isn't being covered by anybody else. And so I'd say, that's what's keeping me in this job, because I mean, it can be crazy. The hours can be crazy, but it gives you kind of an adrenaline rush and just a drive to wake up every day to do this. And so I'm so proud of what I do. And I definitely encourage other people to pursue it. It may not be on your radar in school.
Awesome, Stephanie. Thank you very much. And I would also say, people listen, they're not necessarily farmers. They might be one or two generations from the farm, but they have that affinity for rural life and they want to know what's going on in whatever state it is, in rural country. And it is. And there are a lot of people that work in ag. They might be seed dealers, they might be in retail somehow. They're not farming, but they're in ag, and so they're also listing. So yeah, we reach more than we think we reach. All right,
DeLoss,
Chris.
if
Yes.
they're not in egg, they want to be.
All right, I hear that. All right, Christine, let's hear from you.
Well, thank you, DeLoss. And Stephanie, that ag retail audience is my favorite that you work with. So I am a senior marketing communications manager with Valent USA. So we are an ag chemical company. Valent is headquartered in the state of California, San Francisco Bay Area, but I do my job full remote from Central Missouri. Been with Valent a little over 3 years. I originally joined Valent to be the marketing communications manager focused on their row crop business. But through some internal opportunities, my role has grown, and I now lead the marketing communications team. What that means is that I spend a lot of time working with people and reviewing and giving thumbs ups or feedback on content far more than I create content myself. I did not realize that I was making that turn until after I had done it. But I have 4 direct reports and about 50 indirect. And so I spend my time communicating, but with people, not focused so much on direct content creation for those ag retailers distributing our products or the growers who are our end users. But how I got there is a little bit of a winding path. So I am a University of Missouri grad. I have a bachelor's in ag journalism and minor in ag economics.
Sorry, Christine, was my mic on when I groaned? I apologize.
Yeah, you did. You
Oh,
did.
terribly sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
And I'm going to follow in Stephanie's comment and and reference our incredibly overrated football team right now. 4-0 only means just so much. But I have an Ag J degree because my favorite classes in high school were FFA or ag classes and yearbook. That's what that's what Christine at 17 used for decision making. But before you put much stock in that, know that I also have a master's degree in parks, recreation, and tourism, because I didn't want to grow up at the end of my undergraduate degree. And I got a grad school offer faster than I got a job offer that didn't make me cry at the starting salary. I did internships in newspaper and local TV and decided really fast I liked the strategic communications side more than the traditional journalism roles. I had to experiment though. I did communications for the university system. I worked in public affairs and government and was the communications director for our state soybean association. So getting that check off in nonprofit experience before I came to the corporate side at Valent. As far as a typical day and what I love about it, Stephanie, I echo you on the variety. But it's a very different kind of variety, to say the least. My typical day starts with document reviews, whether that's proposals for press releases, website content, digital or native advertising, as well as lots of internal meetings. I don't do much content creation myself. I'm generally coaching those who do at this point. Sometimes I miss the satisfaction of creating, of sitting down and writing. But one of the things that I love is the coaching element of working with people. And problem solving is a lot of fun for me. I like the idea of making things better for the people that I spend my time with. And I'm still learning every day. And whether it's about crops or the business side of agriculture, to me, that's huge. All right, the only other bullet point I had on my little list from you, DeLoss, was how to get the job. And this is one of my fun facts. I have never gotten a job I outright applied for. Every job, every internship, going back to, summer gigs in college, it's because of a relationship that I had with someone. Whether it was a mentor, whether it was faculty at the university. I got my first big kid job from a friend of mine's boss because I'd volunteered to carry the camera bag at a farm shoot. For those of you who know Becky Frankenbach at Missouri Corn, I carried her camera bag. But at Valent, the thing that really worked out was, well, at the time, my college roommate was on their sales team and told me about the opening before it was posted. But what I've learned coming into the corporate environment is Valent doesn't hire new grads. They are looking for folks who have 3 to 5 or more years of experience to join their marketing team. If you are coming to Valent straight out of school, it is probably into either a sales or a field research role. And the other thing I would say is, we've all heard the line, pick your battles, but pick the battles that matter. If you're taking on a big project, if you're taking on extra responsibilities, make sure that what you're taking on is impactful and gets noticed in the right way and isn't task work that will bury you or something that doesn't gain awareness of people who can create further opportunities. You want to be learning and you want to be visible. With that, I yield.
Yeah. Very good, Christine. Thank you. I did not know those things about you. That is fascinating. And I'm the same way too. I can't think of a job that I got without knowing somebody along the way to help make it so. Makes a huge difference. And going back to what Stephanie said, she got started just by asking. It can really be that way to start. So.
Well,
all right.
It sure is a nice feeling to hold the door open for someone who's wanting to come behind you or to help them up the ladder, depending on which cliche you like.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Bryce, let's hear from you, sir.
All right, the 3-1 Huskers, my turn. No jokes from DeLoss today, so we'll count
ILL.
Friday night under the lights. Back to the subject matter at hand. All right. I'm Bryce Duskett. I'm the operations manager as well as a farm broadcaster for the Rural Radio Network, which is in Nebraska, reaching this Nebraska and the 7 states surrounding us. So I started out this job at a little bit different capacity about 7 years ago, which brings me to my education. I attended the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and I majored in a fancy way of saying agricultural communications. I've got universities. I got away with language, but also had a minor in entrepreneurship through a program they have here in Lincoln. So my office is actually part of campus. You can kind of see it behind me. The volleyball stadium is just out my window, which is pretty cool. And we opened up this spot when I graduated from Lincoln. Going back to what has been discussed about doors opening, taking opportunities, I, similar to Stephanie, was not planning on a career in radio. Did an internship at one of our stations and thought, well, that was a fun experience, but don't plan to move out to that part of Nebraska anytime soon. And the right things happen at the right times. And here I am now 7 years into the job. So enjoying what I do. What is it that I do? It's a good question. It's kind of a strange capacity visiting about this today because, you know, most of my 7 years has been in a large capacity as a farm broadcaster. But now I would call myself kind of a hybrid manager. I just came up with that term thinking about how I would describe myself on this call because I am a broadcaster and then a leader of a couple of different divisions within our company. So real quick, what does my day look like? Like many of you wear a few different hats. So I would say 50% of my day is spent kind of on the broadcast side. In the mornings, I get to co-host a syndicated country music radio show that's now heard on stations across Nebraska. I also contribute, obviously, to the Rural Radio Network, which I get to lead as anchoring various newscasts and contributing content there. And then kind of the third bucket of broadcasting is that I host an agricultural TV show through a partnership that we formed a few years ago. So that's half of my day. The other half of my day is spent being the operations manager for the network, which means working with our talented team of farm broadcasters that are largely dotted all across the state. And then in a business development role, kind of looking at new opportunities, creating those, and then also looking at different revenue opportunities and aligning broadcast with the revenue side of it and being the in-between person between my sales colleagues and management team with our broadcasters and the great product they're putting out. That's bucket number one of management. Bucket number two is I also lead our digital content for the company, which is 15 radio stations across the state with our network. So if it's a digital product, thinking about websites, apps, podcasts, any of those, I kind of am the go-to person for that and lead those efforts. DeLoss asked us also to talk about what we enjoy about our job, and I, especially in the management front, which I'll try to spend more time as I represent that tonight, talking about. We are building the future in front of us each and every day. Radio is a very old industry, but the things we're doing today are new. And that's really exciting. And radio is an exciting career field for each of you on this this Zoom know that already, but it's fun to be able to wake up and do that each day. And I love creating new content through that business development role, working with our sales team to sponsor that new content. And then most of all, I really enjoy watching our people and the content they create succeed. So really enjoy the role I have, kind of a unique one, but that's what I have, DeLoss. I'll yield back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks to all three of you, and we have some time for questions.
Yeah, Jake, you had your hand raised before.
Yeah. I wanted to follow up on, you were talking about like Valent hires looking for, already have entered career 3 to 5 years experience. How do you translate experience that you've done in college? Probably, so I'm a junior right now. I took a gap year, so I'm a bit older, and I bring some additional positions. I work quite a bit. If you were to actually count up the years of the hours, by the time I graduate, I will have probably have worked in ag media, editing, journalism, any form of ag media for probably 2 years and over. So how have you seen that translated for people who are entering? Because when I was in those internships, was I getting equally paid? No, but was I producing the same type of work? I was. So I feel like it's always an interesting balance of like, I'm doing everything that these full-time staff are doing, but like, I don't know how to present it in the
Mhm.
future.
Yeah, you're concerned that if they see the resume, they'll say he has 0, when in fact you have a lot more than that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. You've got two tools to work with there. One is your network. Show us that you do have the relationships. And then use that cover letter, use your network to advocate for you, and show that you also have the maturity. Because while it can be hard to see when you're 21 and walking across the stage with your bachelor's after 4 years of school and a couple internships, there is a huge difference in maturity between, say, 21 and 25. And a lot of it comes into what you say no to. It's not just about the work that you do, but it's about how you invest your time, how you handle building relationships in a professional network, as well as in the office. You know, at Valent, about 50% of our team works full remote. And that takes a different type of discipline, of focus, and intentionality on relationship building, because you don't just run into people in the break room. You can't swing by someone's desk. And it's a lot harder to catch those subtle, hey, this worked or this didn't, with someone. And that can be really tough. And depending on your internship experiences, you may have already built some of that, but we won't know that until we have a conversation with you. So don't be shy. If you are looking at a job like that and it says 3 to 5 years of experience, and yeah, you finished your bachelor's, but you've been working full time within, make us have that conversation with you. Don't assume that we do or don't notice.
I like that. Thank you.
Good.
Ping us on LinkedIn. Goodness gracious. HR prepares us. They tell us if we're posting a job, know that it's going to come, it is not weird or out of the norm. You know, if you ping me on my personal Snapchat, I'm probably going to cringe.
Yep.
But something like LinkedIn, absolutely reach out, get to know us, give us the opportunity to know you before you write yourself in or out on that something with experience.
Awesome. Thank you.
My question specifically to Stephanie and Bryce, and feel free to pitch in, if you others have an idea too, is what's the difference between a sponsored content ad and something that is news that's being relayed on your websites, your media? Is there a clear difference between church and state? Do you disclose that? Like, this is a paid interview spot. Do you put that on your radio program? Like, how does that look? And then maybe on top of that, has that made you feel awkward? Like saying you're a journalist or a farm broadcaster, but then you do some sponsored content. So just overall, just wondering what's the difference in your opinion, the difference between sponsored content and something that may be news?
Very good question.
Bryce, you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, we are required by law in our FCC file that we always have to have like on hand. Anyone can come in and ask for it. If we are putting paid content or sponsored content on our radio program, we have to list that it is paid. I don't think we have to say it in the in the program, but no, and that was difficult for me too at first because I was in print journalism and code of ethics, yada yada, and that still applies in farm broadcasting. But it was a conversation that I was like, wait a second, you know, we're getting paid to do news. But we're offering a free news service, and you know, if people are going to pay for airtime that they wouldn't normally get, that's all I have on that. Because I don't, you know, maybe I need to educate myself more on that too. But Bryce, thoughts?
Yeah, so how we've gone about it, Michelle, is so my hard line in the sand is that our ag news or for our radio stations or newscasts are not a sales asset to go out there. You know, there's adjacencies next to them, and there are programs that air on our stations that are paid, but they're labeled as things other than our ag news updates or market casts, et cetera. So that's the line in the sand that we've drawn and kind of operate within. And we do create programming that is, sponsored by somebody, but I think a sponsorship of a program may be a little bit different than you're talking about. I'm thinking about a segment we call Agrono Minute, which is checking in with agronomists, and it is 100% paid. And I think we don't specifically disclose, hey, this was brought to you by so-and-so, but when they hear that, I think, and that's probably a dangerous thing to do, but I think it's clear that it is a paid segment. It's a good question, Michelle, and I'm curious your thoughts and your experience in that space too, what you'd like to contribute.
I mean, it's a question I keep asking a lot of people recently because I don't know how comfortable I feel when I'm doing an interview and what the listener knows. And so it just depends what kind of farm broadcaster and journalist I think you want to be. I think when I consume regular media, like just overall, like if I know it's being paid, my decision factor may be different. And then I feel like, oh, I don't know, is that ethical? Is it not? Because isn't it a journalist's job is to be, not skewed at all and not supposed to have not supposed to, but like an opinion, like you shouldn't have, whatever way you lean in that. So it's just, I don't know what's right. And I'm not the expert, but when you have social media, like I need to dig into it more. But technically, if there's any payment or anything like that, I think you need to say hashtag sponsored content or ad. And I don't know how many people actually do that. So yeah, I think maybe it's a broader question, but I know that it probably plays into the strategy for some of NAFB members overall. So who wants to disclose that? Who now I want to respect that too. But I think maybe it could be a good conversation in the broader sense of things as it becomes more of a gray area. But maybe it's always become a gray area. I have no idea.
Well, one thing I would also add, and this is something that could be debated for a long time. There are plenty of people, like, it's harvest time. We could talk to agronomists right now. Do you talk to an agronomist because their company advertises to a certain extent? This guy works for a company that doesn't advertise. Should we talk to him? My thought is in that case, it's much more about the quality of the interview and the person doing it. But not everybody agrees with that necessarily, and so that is one that can be tossed around quite a bit. Am I talking because we got 1,200 certified crop specialists in Illinois, many of whom are very good interviews and trusted experts. So who do you choose? That could be regional in a place like Illinois. We'd probably start in the South first and make our way north. But do you talk to the Calvasgro guy? Do you talk to the Syngenta guy? Do you talk to AgriGold, AgriLiant? You have many from which to choose, and so for me, it's more about quality of content. So that is a similar. It's not paid, but what has been paid in the past or what might be paid in the future could still influence who we talk to. The ones on paid, I don't mind too much. The ones I really mind are the ones where they script the interview for us. And that gives me gas. I don't like that. I see why they would want to control their message from the person doing the answering, but scripting my questions, I'm not a big fan of.
I winced when you said that because on the side that would typically buy a spot like that,
Yeah.
My belief is those don't ever turn out as well as content where you've trusted your folks to have a conversation. I may be biased in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a marketing communications person that says, hey, if you interviewed one of our, field technology folks, these are PhDs. If they were a tough interview because they could be better about giving a concise answer, let us know. We'd love to coach them to be a better interview and higher on your list in the future.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll add one more thought, Michelle, for you, because I I dealt with a situation yesterday that actually derailed my entire day. I'm not bitter about it though. As you know, in your career, what I would encourage you to do is ask the management, of whichever company you might be working for or with at any moment, what is their policy going in? And of course, policy can change, but as I was dealing with something, I said, well, we need to have this policy and it needs to be clear across, all of our stations. That way there's no gray area about it. And if it's a company you want to work with, I'm sure you'll find a way to work through that. But asking upfront, what is your policy within that space, I think will alleviate some long-term challenges or friction back and forth in your head, because you're certainly not alone in that struggle.
I think that way too, Michelle, as I'm not a formally trained journalist, where schools in the Northeast lack a lot of ag comm, ag lead, ag ed, and it's in very different forms via graduate school. So I've taken very few journalism classes, but enough experience and whatnot to start thinking that way. And ag media works in a very different sense because we're so big and we're also connected. Like no other journalist is going to be working with an option of 1,300 crop advisors amongst 10 different brands. Like that's very, very unheard of. So I think the same way you do. Another question for Bryce and whoever this applies to, do you think ag TV is expanding? There's a few mighty shows, but just a few. Is there long-term profitability in that for ag news, rural TV? I haven't seen too much growth in that lately, just the same shows across the United States that have been around for 3-4 years.
It's a good question. I only have my past 7 years in the profession to speak from. I called up a fellow NAFB broadcaster, Ken Root, a couple of months ago in this exact space. And I said, Ken, I didn't realize you were attached to this program in Iowa when you were there. Tell me about it, because I think that's a space we should grow in, and picked his brain for, I think, 45 minutes on a drive one time, which was a great opportunity. And I'll just sidetrack here, Jake and Michelle, for the two of you. Whenever you've got questions about like the industry, just like the one you asked Jake, NAFB is such a good resource. I mean, there's resources everywhere, but the members of I don't know, I know Ken Root pretty well, so that's not an example, but somebody else of picking up the phone and being able to ask those questions, the historical knowledge within the sector is phenomenal, and that's a good way to shape your own way of thinking. So ag TV moving forward, I host a weekly TV show, so I need to be careful about how I go about saying that. You look historically, ag TV is not what it was, and I don't think it will ever return to the same state that it was in its most glorious day, because local TV is not and will not go back to those same days. That said, I do believe firmly there are opportunities within that space, especially around some niches. You mentioned you worked with AgriPulse, what AgriPulse launched with their TV program now airing on RFD. The show that I get to host on a weekly basis airs on Nebraska Public Media, our PBS station across the state. And so within certain niches, covering things that aren't maybe identical to somebody else is where I see opportunity. And it is still you look at the different surveys, NAFB research, but then others, and it's clear that farmers are still watching a lot of ag TV. So it's definitely a prominent space. I'm just not sure. I am positive it's not going to be what it once was. It's going to look different. And what that looks like is up to the two of you and perhaps all of us on the Zoom to figure out what it's going to be moving forward.
Have you seen any public television models for ag? I feel like I've seen maybe a episode series on a state-based public media, because I don't know, you have the current forms of TV shows are profitable based on commercial placement and advertisement, including AgriPulse. But the other option would be public sponsored media, which is nonprofit, publicly sourced. Do you think that's an option, or have you seen that done before?
Yeah. So the most notable is produced in Iowa, Market to Market,
Yeah.
which they tape on Fridays and airs, I think, on Iowa PBS first on Friday. And then I think many of the states carry that programming in some fashion, including Nebraska at 6:30 on Saturdays, followed by the program I host, which is called Market Journal, airing on Nebraska Public Media at 7 a.m. and then a few different times. So I think it is a space, it takes the right partnerships. I talked about that in my intro. So the show that I work on and get to host, Market Journal, is produced by our land grant in Nebraska, the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Ag and Natural Resources. So they're the ones who put the whole show together and pay for that, and then it's distributed through Nebraska Public Media. So it's going to take the right people, if that's something, Jake, that you're interested in, with the right ideas and creating that partnership to make it happen. I do think it's a space that's certainly worth exploring if you have an interest in it.
One thing I would say too is that depending on how you do it, video takes a long time to create content. So especially like a 24-hour station or something like that, that is a lot of content, which means it takes a lot of people to do so. And so it takes a lot of investment to be able to get that off the ground and sustain it. So, but more of a half-hour conversational piece that doesn't, it may even require a pretty small set. And if you light it right, it looks a lot bigger than it actually is. So yeah, those are definitely two different animals, like a featured program versus a channel. Yeah, two totally different deals there.
I'd love to just talk about news and what you think is newsworthy. And of course, I think it depends on the person, but if you think about every day where you look for news and what you think is relevant to your listeners, just be interested to hear your answers.
Stephanie?
Yeah, well, every day when I drive to work, I take a county highway and whatever's happening in the field. Obviously, like agriculture is cyclical, right? So you're always going to revisit those topics, like harvest season, planting season, etc. But then also, like, oh my gosh, there's stories everywhere you look. Because you also have to remember, farmers are consumers too. So they also care about food prices and supply chain and healthcare, and they have aging parents, and they also need to buy fuel. So there's those pieces. So those are like, staying on top of these things. This is what's happening every day. Obviously things in politics, policy, I should say, always watching policy. Oh gosh, it does feel like everywhere you look. I watch a lot of what's happening in other industries as well, manufacturing, food processing, healthcare, because all these things, impact agriculture as well. I love slice of life stories. Visiting with a student who's gone on to take a leadership role, an FFA officer who took on a leadership role somewhere, or, students go to Washington, D.C., or somebody has a farm accident and the community gathers around up. There's all of these slice of life stories that really tell the story of what rural Wisconsin, rural America is all about. So always having my nose on that. Gosh, everywhere you look, when someone struggles to find a story idea, we always say, go for a drive. Just look around, look at what's around you, because life is happening all the time around us, and that's where your stories are.
Chime in, add just a little bit to what Stephanie said, spot on. There's two things I think about more than I should. And DeLosh, you might have to help me. Who's the gentleman who has long been the chair of the NAFB Awards lunch and program?
Oh, Mike Brine.
Mike Ryan. Several NAFBs ago, stood at the front and nearly was banging on the table talking about how local is the only thing that makes your broadcast relevant. And I think about that often when I put together newscasts, because to what Stephanie was talking about, if we're not going to share these stories Nobody else is. They're not going to get covered. So I think about that very much, Michelle, and I'm going to try to share my screen here. The other thing I spent a lot of time thinking about, hopefully this is showing. You seeing the NAFB research up here?
I see it.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think about this question as published in the latest NAFB research about info desired from ag radio. I don't like to blanket anything, but this gives you a great preview of what people responding to the survey, what type of information, when you listen to your local farm broadcaster, do you want to consume essentially? Ag markets, commodity prices, obviously weather, they're getting that usually from their local radio station. Number 3, local regional ag news, enhancing what Stephanie was just saying. Commentary, world trade news, and you can kind of see the list goes on from there. So I use this research often and go reference that as a pulse of what people responding to the survey care about.
We would get that question. What do you think will be the biggest issue for farmers this year? And I'll say markets and weather. Same as it has been. But there are a lot of stories beyond just, hey, what happened? You know, I do a daily market program, and I do 2 weather interviews each week, and maybe more if there's severe weather forecast. But there are plenty of things then related to markets, which could include low river levels, or you know, trade with other countries, or issues with trade with other countries if we're fighting Canada or Mexico on some sort of uh, uh, something related to our trade agreements. So you can make tentacles from that connect to markets and weather, and you know what does that mean for farmers. I still think I grew up on a 4-generation farm, and there's a lot of times when I'll think, would my dad care about this? And if not, I'm probably not going to spend much time on it.
Oh, we take a bias
Sometimes-
to action. Oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
I just want to say, yeah, sometimes I call my dad.
Nice.
Dad, what are you working on? What are you doing? What are your customers saying? And just, you know, your network in the industry. I don't grow crops, so I call someone who does.
Mhm.
That's it. We have a bias to action when we're questioning whether something is worth dropping into your inboxes from a PR standpoint. Can a farmer do anything about this right now? Is it a product they can buy? Is it a weed they can kill? Is it weather that we know is going to affect the crop right now? If it isn't, if it's a pipeline product that won't see the ground in a farmer's field for 3 years, we're not going to drop that in your inbox. Because what we see is from you guys as media, if the farmer doesn't care about it, you don't want it in your as clutter either.
And if you send stuff that we are like, then we're less likely to find one when it matters.
You
Right.
get a direct route to DeLoss's spam filter.
I go through, I mean, I get pitched on stuff every day where I'm like, no, how did I get on your email list? Why would you think I would want to do this interview? No. But when it comes from trusted people in the business, then definitely gets attention.
I have another question. We are in an election season, and I find it interesting on what levels of depth. I consider myself a political reporter. I read about politics and economics a lot, but I'm curious on like farm journals, and when you guys cover news, how far are you guys covering into an election? For example, I live in Northwest Ohio, and there's a race, and I wanted to write about just both sides, environmental policy and ag policy, very basic comparison. I pitched to a few ag publications, and they don't really do election-based work. And understandable, readership may not enjoy that. They don't want to seem sided. Writing a political analysis can be very subjective, very hard to make objective. So I guess, what are you guys' thoughts on writing about elections, given a specific area or previous journalism experience you've had on that?
We don't. That's kind of an in-house rule, like not an in-house rule, but when it's election season, we're not diving into politics of candidates. We'll talk to ag organizations, what are you looking for out of a candidate? We'll talk about how the election might impact trade or diesel prices. Like we'll be like, there's an election coming up. What does that mean for market volatility, that kind of thing? But we're not diving into that. I don't know if there's a movable middle anymore anyway, that we're telling, you're kind of preaching to the choir a little bit. If people want, in my opinion, if people want political analysis, they'll go to a political publication. We're giving farm news. So if there's farm relevance there, like, yeah, we talk about the farm bill, we talk about trade policy, but we're not trying to, stir up comments on our Facebook page about, Trump v. Kamala.
We have a hour-long issues show, and there was one time where we took, I don't remember what the race was, but we took each candidate. They were given these questions. You have this amount of time. That's it. We're going to do that. That's the interview. And they all participated, and it was all a certain amount of time. So no more for either person. It was all equal. And I thought it was very well done. But it takes a lot of work to make that kind of coordination to make sure everybody's on, everybody gets the same amount of time. And if you don't have a long form program, it's really difficult to do. So, but yeah, by and large, we stay away from the specifics about campaigns.
I do want to add something too. I talked to like the Wisconsin GOP and the Wisconsin Democratic Party. And I like the other day I called because I'm just like, do you guys have ag experts that can speak to like maybe party stance? Like we were just curious about it for our own reasons. And I called them and they're like, well, and then she gave me the name of a farmer that we talk to all the time. And I'm like, you're talking to the same people we are about ag policy. Like they don't have a farm specialist.
The American Farm Bureau did a survey with each candidate. And so all I did with that was they did the survey, there's the topics that were covered, and you can find it at fb.org. So didn't even get into what either one of them said about anything. Just, hey, if you want to go see it, here's where you go find it.
Stephanie, to your point, when I was with the Soybean Association, any candidate that we endorsed, and even some that we didn't, would immediately want to know which of our farmers could speak on their behalf.
Wow.
It was a clockwork thing. It's, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one.
Maybe your story, Jake, is how far removed is Congress from the farm?
It's an interesting race because we have, I'll explain it for a quick second. The longest running congresswoman versus someone who's a GOP who's just placed in there. And it's a increasingly big farm district. It's worth, I understand there's some races that it's not worth covering. You know what your margins are going to be, but this is, and no one's covered it yet. And we're a Lake Erie state, and this is the Lake Erie district. So if you're going to point to someone in Congress to talk about the Great Lakes, this is the person to do it. So that's all I was thinking. Oh, I had a follow-up question. I forgot it. It'll come up again.
I'll just add, Jake, I admire your motivation and for pushing that story, and I would say keep it up. In the broadcast sector, we're kind of speaking from tonight. It's challenging for a few reasons that you've heard already. One that was kind of mentioned, but I'll detail it a little bit more in depth, is equal time. If we have a political candidate come on the air, the other candidate can demand and will demand in most situations equal time, and by law we have to give that time to them. So even if if it's a 30-second news cut, but it's deemed as part of the race, we have to do that. So I think on the broadcast side it's a little bit tricky and people have been burned, and so they might shy away from it. But as on the print side, which I think you're talking about, you should keep up that style of your ambition to write that story and trying to cover that, because that is certainly important. And I think you'll find a home for that if you keep it up.
With the three of the participants, would you mind typing your emails into the chat? In case this has been recorded, and in case someone comes back and watches it and might have questions of their own.
Hey, DeLoss,
yeah.
before, if someone requests this video, can you take out the part where I said Bob Bosold is like 80? I don't think he's 80 now that I'm thinking about it. And then,
I don't know. I don't know how to edit in here, but maybe we can AI it where it goes 72.
He probably won't see it. He'll be fine. I just had one more quick question. But as you look at the role of who you are as a farm broadcaster, is how do you measure success to your supervisor or to whomever? Is your role to inform, and that may be like 5 podcast views, let's say, or is your role to somewhat entertain, and then hopefully you get, a few hundred downloads and a few thousand views in social media? Where do you see that role being in, to inform, to educate with numbers? Like, where do you see success?
was this pointed at anyone, Michelle?
Well, Stephanie and Bryce, potentially, and Christine and DeLoss, you're welcome to join
Good
on.
question.
Too.
From a sales perspective, I want to say numbers are always typically how success is measured. As a farm broadcaster, I measure success personally through the anecdotal comments and feedback I get from my listeners. Success to me is going to the Juneau County Fair and having a 16-year-old girl come up to me and say, I heard you on the radio. I milked cows with my boyfriend and we listened to you in the morning. And that blows me away. It's going to an apple growers field day and having a set of parents come up to me and say, my kids listen to your station, The Farm. If we change the station in the vehicle, they get so upset. And our daughter wants to be a farm broadcaster like you. And then next thing you know, we get an intern application when she turns 16. She was our youngest intern ever. That to me is success. Knowing that, you got maybe your stereotypical farmer who's listening, and we know they're listening. They're texting us through our talk text line. They say hi to us at field days. They're commenting on Facebook. But then you have that next generation of listeners, and they're just as tuned in. And what we're doing is important. That to me is how I measure success.
DeLoss, why don't you chime in with your thoughts? I'm still pondering mine.
Well, and we also have a rating system called AMR, Ag Market Research. I just realized the sun's going down. I don't have a light on behind me, so this is probably a pretty dark background. I just realized that. It's called Ag Market Research, and it's a farmer survey, and it gives ratings. So there is, and that is used. Christine, I'm sure you would agree with that, right? That gets used as the who's effective, or who they would consider to be effective from an advertising perspective in getting their message out. So that does exist. We also have people, our programs are stored online, and we do count downloads. So there are certainly people that take interest to that, and I would agree with Stephanie. There's a lot of it is anecdotal. I was just at a thing yesterday, and as soon as I started talking, a guy was like, "Oh, I know that voice." That kind of stuff is really valuable. The other way I measure success is when my guest says, "That's a good question." I've been doing this a long time. I still get excited when somebody says that. So, but a lot of it is anecdotal and experiential.
What a great question, Michelle. You're making me think, in the words of DeLoss there. Good question. It's because I do wear these multiple hats that I'm really struggling. How do I answer your question in a succinct way? Because as a broadcaster, you should care about the things DeLoss and Stephanie talked about, because those are the important things that the people are recognizing you at the most basic level. With all of our reports in a day, if if they're being, we have a combination of live reports that are over the air. There's zero room for error with a combination. So we've got live reports plus pre-recorded, and almost every day, every report goes without any issues. But when I get involved, there are issues. So when we have clean broadcast day, that's a successful day. So as a broadcaster, I would keep up, what Stephanie and the law said about, that's where you should find your motivation of continuing to push forward. If you ever switch over into more of a management role, every morning I get an email with a pacing report that has my budget in it. It has where we sit at the moment, how much money we added in the week, and there are 6 of us as part of our senior management team that get that same email every day. But I'll add a caveat here. Our broadcast team, we met a couple of weeks ago, and I share with them, here's where we're at for a year goal. Here's where we're going to be in 5 years. But they don't get that same report, and there's good reason for that, because that is not part of their daily job. I'm kind of a buffer between that. We set goals and we're going to achieve them and make plans to do so. But the numbers are not what our broadcasters need to be worried about. So lots of sputtering around here, but yeah, different levels to have success, certainly. Christine, I'm curious your thoughts. How do you measure success?
All of the above. So we do look at ratings. We typically look at those before we pitch you or buy placements on your, adjacent to your broadcasts. But when we're looking at, is this effective? We do match the geography from where people visit our website to where we've invested, whether it's in hosting a field day in the area or buying advertising. So if we hosted a field day in Mississippi, we're going to look for an uptick in website and social traffic around that, where people were looking for more. That's also what we're going to request from your sales team is, to your point, any downloads, hits on that posted piece. But then we also really like the anecdotal. When our sales reps walk into a retail location, or they get a message from a farmer razzing them about how they sounded on the radio, that's a high.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a high. Or, if we have a farmer that has been willing to give a testimonial on one of our products and it runs and someone razzes him and he lets me know, that's a win.
Big win.
We're much more interested in using air coverage and media to support our sales team in the field so that they're not going in completely cold to a retailer. The retailers heard about the new product or heard about the financing program or knows that this rain in the Southeast means fungicide is going to be critical, maybe not now, but back in July when we were on the front end of hurricane season. Those are the conversations that we want to see happen, because ultimately, while we love getting coverage from our ag broadcaster friends, the metric for us is this product moving.
Yeah.
I asked that question from last fall. I interned with the mainstream television station, and every day I got numbers of how many video views and website clicks of each story or each page. And sometimes my ag stories were, the top, and some of them, it just, I guess, provided some leverage. And when I pitched an egg story to my boss, like, hey, these are doing great, we should continue to do them. But it's also some of those stories could easily be seen as clickbait, or not so excited, but the ones that were in the top few. And so it just, like, what's our role? Is it to inform? Is it to entertain? Is it to educate? I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably all three, but thanks for sharing your perspective.
All right. Well, hey, we've gone an hour, so it's been a fantastic conversation, but and I'm glad that Zoom didn't just end automatically, so that was nice. But I should probably call it an evening for both of you, and if anyone is still watching as a recording, National Association of Farm Broadcasting Annual Conventions in Kansas City, November 13 through 15. You can find it. You can register at NAFB.com. Certainly highly encourage it. People are very welcoming there. Students can come in. You can sit at tables at receptions and at meals and just talk to folks and pick their brain. And you never know who you might meet and what you might come out of there with. Certainly, if you did, Thursday we have an event called Trade Talk, which is highly encouraged. Wednesday afternoon, evening is also a good time to come if you're limited in how long you could be there. But certainly encourage you to check that out, nafb.com, and it's going to be a really good event. And it's a highlight for me every year, just to get not just broadcasters together, but to get people in the industry together and see old friends and celebrate the industry. So hope you're able to give that some consideration. And if you have more questions, certainly reach out. My email was also on the invite, and these three have shared theirs. So if you have more questions, keep them coming. So well, thank you all very much.
See you guys at convention.
Yeah,
See
cool.
everyone in Kansas City.
Awesome.
Yes, it was awesome. We'll see you soon.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.